My name is Marion Verle. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SustainCert, and I am delighted to be moderating such an amazing panel talking about unlocking the potential of carbon market with transparent digital end-to-end systems. So before I give the floor to my respected and well-known panelists in this space, I just want to share a few words to frame the conversation. I'll start by saying that I'm very happy to see that we have more people in the room than on the panel, despite such a late time in the day. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for your interest in the future of market mechanisms in their digital future. So why do we need digital systems? If you look at the numbers, by 2050, we're going to have to decarbonize by 50%. It's not going to happen with BAU. It's likely going to require a significant scaling of existing solutions. We're going to need new solutions for sure, but we're going to have to start by scaling what we have, and that includes regulations and market mechanisms. Market mechanisms have huge potential, and we've been discussing that potential during the last couple of days and until tomorrow here, but they also face a number of issues. So just to list a couple of issues that market mechanisms face, and I'm sure you know quite a few of them. I think we've experienced over the last years increasing fragmentation in the market. There's fragmented regulations, fragmented systems, fragmented expectations. So the fragmentation is hindering growth and scaling of market mechanism. Another issue we face is this search for quality. And it's quite counterintuitive if you look at the fact that we are in a state where the market is going through a quality crisis, and at the same time we're spending enormous amount of time, energy and resources on monitoring, reporting and verification. I don't know any other financing instrument that spends so much money per ton of CO2 on MRV, and yet we don't get the quality we all expect. Another issue that is hindering the growth of market mechanisms is the lack of demand. Where are the buyers? What are the buyers' concerns? Well, most of them will ask you, how do I deal with double counting? How do I make sure that a ton is a ton? How do I manage overlap between the VCM and Article 6.4? Well, the good news is that all those issues that are hindering the growth of market mechanisms can be solved by transparent end-to-end digital systems. And that's what we will unpack during this panel discussion. As you can see on the graph, diagram that's on the screen, the World Bank has sort of mapped out how an end-to-end digital ecosystem could look like. And we're fortunate enough to have representatives from all the boxes on the screen on this panel. So we'll start from the physical layer, and then we'll move towards the right-hand side and unpack what are specific use cases, examples of how digital system, what type of system, and how do those systems unlock value. And then we'll talk about the challenges, because all of us, I think, on this panel agree that the level of adoption we've seen over the last years hasn't been up to our expectations. So we want to make sure we spend time talking about challenges. Why are we not seeing more adoption for solutions that tick so many boxes? So why is it so hard to get end-to-end digital systems adopted and working for carbon markets? So without further ado, I'll start with you, Stefan. So you work for A2EI, which is a research institute, and you're the prospect project lead and managing director of A2EI. You are really focusing on the first sort of building blocks in the end-to-end ecosystem. Can you give us a few examples, Stefan, of how your approach and prospect as a platform is unlocking and making DMRV, so digital data collection, monitoring, reporting and verification possible?
Thanks, Marianne. Happy to do so. The A2EI is a not-for-profit organization based here in Berlin, just a little bit of background. And together with Get Invest, it's an instrument of the GIZ, we have been working since the last 2 years on a platform called Prospect, which is an open source, open access data platform, which aims to connect different existing and upcoming data sources that are able to provide, say, automated digitized data in a reliable way automatically into, let's say, one large kind of infrastructure that can then be used by value-added services. So basically, we conceive Prospect as a kind of data infrastructure layer that avoids a lot of double connection and reporting for especially the energy access market. And basically, Prospect is coming from the side of energy access, where DMRV itself is also a challenge. So basically, it's not only on the carbon markets, but also, especially on energy access, a lot of things are stipulated in a market with result-based finance programs, for instance, or other basically programs where governments need to understand basically how certain assets in the field are deployed, are they working, and basically can they receive subsidies, can they receive additional stipulations, just to bring in the parallels to the carbon market. That's basically was the starting principle. In the last couple of months and months rather, we perceive that basically the challenges in the carbon market are comparable. If you look at DMRV in itself, basically it's digital monitoring, reporting, and verification. Monitoring is quite straightforward. Basically, you have maybe a data sensor, you have something that emits digital data, you monitor this data, and you store it, and you are able basically to report on it. This one is quite straightforward, but the interesting piece, and the most challenging piece also, is the verification piece. How do you verify that this data is somehow correct? Without being able to say it's fully correct or not, but at least being able to bring in evidence that this data is not just fully made up. There are a couple of approaches to this. First of all, you have the more of a straightforward approach of plausibility checks. Basically, an asset producing solar power at night is not very plausible, but that basically does not really help you to verify the data. It just tells you this data is plausible or not plausible. On the verification layer, basically on the Prospect side, we have developed a different approach. We call it a data triangulation, where we try to find different independent sources for the same data point, which are basically supporting each other. So basically, we try to triangulate a certain data point by different other sources. And I want to give you a very hands-on example because it's very dry. We're currently implementing a project in Uganda with the Ministry of Energy in Uganda. It's a World Bank-funded program which aims to electrify, I think it's a couple of million households in upcountry Uganda. It's very much about off-grid solar standalone systems, and it's a subsidy-based approach. So basically, if a local company, distributor, an ESCO, installs a system in basically in upcountry Uganda, they get a certain subsidy for this system. And then they claim they have sold the system towards the authorities, the Ministry of Energy here, and basically then the subsidy is paid. And now basically we have been developing a Prospect as a DMRV system for this program by, in the end, checking these claims against additional data sources. So first of all, what we do is basically when the system is installed in the field, we basically ask the field agent, to take a picture of the national ID, because there's a requirement in this particular program that the national ID has to be provided to avoid any totally false claims. So basically, we take a picture of the national ID, and at the same time, we basically extract data out of the national ID. So basically, we scan the national ID, we apply some OCR technologies on it, and at the same time, we scan the barcode at the back to check against the data that was input in the claim. So there's a first layer, so to say, of verification. We find basically anything that is not matching to each other, and we can flag it accordingly before it's basically getting elevated into the program. Secondly, we with the permission of the ESCO, and they are interested in also supporting DMRV because it simplifies the process massively for them. We are allowed from technical side to access their mobile money wallet that is basically set up for this program. So we can check if a customer has paid for the system. So we use this as a proxy verification for the installation of the system. So if a customer, like the simple logic is, if a customer pays for a system, he has bought it, or she has bought it, and it is working. And very often these systems are paid under the pay-as-you-go scheme. That means people pay off over time, so you can, through a proxy, realize that the system is still up and running. You don't have a direct proof because most of the systems are very small. They don't send data. So basically, you need a proxy verification. And then, obviously, for larger assets, especially productive use of energy, they very often have IoT sensors built in. So we also use basically this as a proxy and check basically if the system is sending data. And then we triangulate all these data points together to say, okay, we can tell you at least that we found different evidences for a certain basically claim under this particular project. This is just to give an example, basically how it works.
That's great. It looks really amazing. And so what are the challenges and why aren't we seeing those type of triangulation happening everywhere now? Because the use cases seem pretty unlimited. So what challenges are you facing?
I mean, there are a couple of structural challenges. So first of all, you have to understand the particular case. You know, you cannot take it over and over again because not everywhere you have mobile money, not everywhere you have IT sensors. So for each, basically, data verification process, you have to think about how you can triangulate. But this can be solved. But there's also a lot of reluctance in terms of basically data sharing. So you have to overcome it with a strong data privacy, data security argumentation. But let's say the interesting fact is the least reluctance comes from the companies who share the data because they see the strong advantages in avoiding a lot of reporting back and forth and IVA work because we can reduce the amount of manual field challenges. But adopting this strategy to, let's say, the current markets, we have seen a lot of resistance of, let's say, the traditional approaches towards accepting digital MRV as a practical tool.
Why?
This is a very good question, Marianne.
All right, so we'll come back to that. But there seems to be maybe cultural or a fear of being made irrelevant, maybe, or losing control. That's
maybe it's also a bit atypical use case.
Yep.
So basically, they have not been designed around, let's say, off-grid solar, small assets, having very little value, having little impact. So basically, the whole schemes, the whole processes were built around totally different use cases. And I think it's difficult to change for them.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for that, Stefan. So moving to you, Jeff. So you're Senior Director at Expansive. Expansive covers, I think, at least 3 boxes on this map. You're a registry provider, you're also a transaction layer provider and a metadata layer provider. So tell us, Jeff, how does Expansive suite of digital solutions help with transparency and trust? What value can we derive from your pieces of the ecosystem?
Sure, and I appreciate that you took my intro from me. But as you said, Expansive is a bit unique in that we operate around 3 of the boxes, or within 3 of the boxes that are here. On the registry layer, we are the underlying technology provider for 3 of the 4 largest VCM registry standards, about 10 renewable energy credit programs in both North America as well as globally, and a number of other environmental commodities, including a clean fuel standard, a plastics recycling program, and a compliance carbon program. And our registry sponsors really run the gamut of public sector entities, private sector entities, and of course, nonprofits. On the transaction layer, we run the CBL exchange, which is the world's largest spot exchange for environmental commodities. And in addition to providing a platform for buyers and sellers to find each other in a number of different ways, it is also used as for settlement services across not just spot contracts, but also forward contracts as well. And that's a bit of a theme I think we'll be getting into, where it's not just the technology and the technology platform, but it's also how you use it, and are you using it appropriately. And metadata layer, this refers to our our portfolio management tool. It's a meta registry with full transaction capabilities, currently known as Expansive Connect. Up until about 6 months ago, it was known as EMA. But it is connected to 14 underlying registries, which means that a user from a single sign-on location can fully manage their holdings across those underlying registries, buying assets, selling them, retiring them, and also use it to engage CBL and additional exchanges and trading platforms in the future, and I can talk about that in a minute. But about 1 billion assets are transacted on Expansive Connect every year. So it's a major tool for several hundred users. To answer your question, though, on transparency, it's 5 o'clock on day 2. I'm still on New York time, so I'm getting a little punchy, and would say that the carbon market and environmental commodities more generally, I'd say are, in many respects, very transparent already. Every credit that is issued on one of our registries that we operate is fully, uniquely, and immutably serialized. The registry sponsor, and by that I mean like a Vera or an ACR or a CAR, they have full visibility into every account that has been onboarded onto the registry, every user that's been onboarded onto the registry, every project that enters the registry, every credit issuance, every credit transaction, every credit retirement. So they have full visibility as to what is going on in their ecosystem right now. And, for example, try doing that with a barrel of crude oil. Try tracking a barrel of crude oil from the wellhead to the refinery gate to the end user car, whatever. Can't do it. And in the carbon space, you have full visibility over that entire ecosystem. In addition to, and kind of getting at your questions about efficiency, we've pioneered a system of reference data, UPN's universal project numbers, and EIN's environmental instrument numbers, with the idea that you can use these to more efficiently streamline connections between different systems, one registry to another. If you import a credit from, or export a credit from one system into another, transactions. And think of these as something like, excuse me, think of these like QSIPs if you come from the financial sector. These unique identifiers that really kind of streamline all of the processes that exist across the entire marketplace or ecosystem.
So how do we get those sort of new or common data language that I think Expansive helps sort of co-create? How do we accelerate their adoption? And what else do you think we should do as an ecosystem to really accelerate the adoption of digital, the adoption and really the integration of end-to-end systems?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, feel free to speak to me if you want to learn more about UPNs and EINs. It's very in the weeds for this session. But I think, and we are beginning, I think, this year moving in this direction of working together, other service providers across all of these buckets, the entire ecosystem, to improve system interoperability and interconnectivity. And when we say something like interoperability, yes, it means things that are very technical, like reference data or joint development of APIs, rules-based automation that facilitates imports and exports or transactions across different systems. But it means kind of working together to ensure that there are things like all of these unsexy things, like robust KYC, know your customer procedures, such that every system, before they connect to another system, knows that certain rules are being followed. It means things like agreeing on universal information security requirements. So things like that, I think, are critical to integrating the entire ecosystem.
Great, thanks for that, Jeff. And we'll come back to some of those points in the discussion. Moving to you, Sonam. So Sonam Tashi with the Climate Change Division of the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources of Bhutan. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to hear your perspective from a government that has engaged with digital systems, that has had to make decisions about what to build and keep in-house and what to buy from external partners. Can you share your perspective on this growing digital ecosystem? How are you devising and implementing your national strategy around this?
Thank you. Before answering, I just want to draw on what our colleague
Sure, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Was mentioning about the transparency of that whole ecosystem, right, of the carbon credits.
Yeah.
That he was mentioning. It's very interesting because in the Article 6 room, we keep discussing about transparency, that we want to add more tables, we want to need more information, but actually this is what some of us believe and feel, not feel, but believe that the market does offer solutions, right? It's there. We have to get down to getting the job done and bring closure to the negotiations. Otherwise, the solutions are there.
I think we all agree
yeah.
that we need closure on Article 6.4.
And I'm saying
If
this
anyone
because
disagrees, raise your hand.
Are you arguing for more
no,
negotiations?
I'm part of it, but no.
Anything we can do to help you close those
No,
negotiations.
so this is
tell
what.
us. Yeah.
So it's interesting to know this, and my colleague from New York just proves what some of us have been saying in the room, that solutions are there. Let's look for it. And this brings us to this, right? I mean, listening to Expansive and then to the colleague before, is that as a government representative, our job is now how to simplify that and make it work for us, especially within, say, the compliance requirements and all. And this is where, like, in terms of the choice and all, I mean, yes, a lot of choices, but I think this is where I just want to draw to the World Bank's Climate Warehouse. I mean, that was interesting for us in terms of engagements with the bank and all, and that was kind of a logical choice, say, let's go with the one that we are most familiar with, yeah. And this whole digital integration for us, I mean, based on our policies, was how do you bring the public and private sector agencies to share information about, say, credits, projects and all. Fortunately, because of the mechanism and all not being operational right now, it helps because we don't have too many projects or no projects. So what we did is we uploaded what was an old project, a CDM project that is going to transition into the 6.4 mechanism to test. And it does work, right, in terms of how public-private partnership can work in trying to, in providing more information and accountability and so on. And then also during our policy discussions and as we're formulating on how we move forward, is this, that how do we, how do you use the technology to mobilize climate action? I mean, to say, to quote a much often cited thing, what people say, to achieve the Paris Agreement goals and all. And this again, in terms of the transparency, then ensuring the environmental integrity of markets and all. This is again, I'll not go into the details of, say, the CAD Trust we've been working, our national registry and all. But yeah, but these were some of the key considerations on how do you build those systems and all. And as I was saying, the solutions are there. It's just that you need to know where to look for, and then you need to be sure of what you need. I mean, what you need the developers or service providers to let you know and all. And then on the fragmentation of standards, I think you mentioned before. I think this is again another concern on how do we overcome these challenges and all. And again, based on our experience, the technical solutions are there on, and then for instance, say you take the CAD Trust. I mean, we've used CAD Trust as an example on how we can address the challenges of, say, the fragmentation of standards in the carbon markets. And then we looked at it, I mean, and since we were involved in its early stages of conceptualizing also, and seeing that based on this experience of the CAD Trust, which is on my right side for the audience, is that can we look into, say, a kind of a one-stop service shop, right, for information, both regarding the voluntary and compliance markets and all, and then also when you look into this is that, and what we're trying to do right now is the national registry that we have, and besides the reporting and tracking requirements, I mean the compliance requirements, can we also look into the transaction side of it, right? Going beyond what is required. And again, the expansive experience on this, it's really good to know that we can do it. And also in an earlier side event, which was not part of this, but in another room where people involved in negotiations were invited, even the UNFCCC Secretariat has informed us about the 6.4 mechanism registry will be able to get these transactions. Will allow for transactions, will allow non-party actors also to open accounts and all. And this is it's a welcome development, because this was in our submission to UNFCCC about our registry. This was one of the requirements, not the requirements, the request that we put in, that we want to see these transactions to be able to take place. Otherwise, if you just have a registry where you can just monitor, track, and and do your accounting and all, it's not really optimizing the digital assets that you have and all. Yeah. And then just want to share that one of our key things when you're looking into all this was that let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look into what's there. And that's the main reason. I mean, if people were to ask, say, why do we kind of narrow down to a certain, say, blockchain option, or why did we take inspiration from the CAD Trust and all? It's really about that. It's there, and let's see how we can build that into our own national registry and all. Yeah. So, and some of the other thing, the benefits of not trying to reinvent the wheel is also this, right? I mean, you have access to the latest technologies, and again, I think as much as the registry and all, there are certain complexities, both political and technical, but it's not really rocket science, right? That that you don't have to spend a fortune on this, and then it's the how do you make use of what's there? I think that has been the driving factor thing on us when we were working on the so-called end-to-end ecosystems. I mean, there's still more work has to be done, no doubt about this. And then the final thing I want to share is that the policy or the legislations of establishing the carbon markets, again, it's the first step, and it's I would say it's the easier part. I mean, despite the political and the bureaucratic negotiations on how you should frame your policies, but the key is this: once you have your policies, the bigger challenge actually comes as the technical challenge, of from a whole menu of options that are there. What do you choose, and how do you go about in setting up the infrastructure, for the markets to work and all. And and so this is, I think, just sharing our experience of how we've tried to balance technology requirements, then the policy, and moving beyond what was just the past, moving beyond just a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your perspective, Sonam, and it's really refreshing to hear such a practical, pragmatic perspective. And what I also take away from what you said is really, let's not reinvent the wheel. We need to simplify this market, and technology is here to bring simplicity to users. And from your perspective as a government user, what I heard is that you'd like to have one-stop shop, like one platform that gives you registry, but also ability to transact, ability to manage double counting, and operate your national carbon market. Great. Yeva, so turning to you now. Can't wait to hear more about CAD Trust. So, Yeva, you're the Director of Strategy and Outreach at CAD Trust. We heard a little bit from Sonam about what you do and your role in that space, but I'd love to start maybe with a quick recap of CAD Trust value proposition and how that aligns with your digital offering. And then we'll talk about challenges. But first, where do you add value in this ecosystem as a metadata layer, and how does that help accelerate climate action?
Absolutely. I mean, it's challenging to go last because so many of the talking points have already been raised. I mean, I think we're all aware of the challenges we're trying to solve, right? Fragmentation, unclear where to go to find information, so many standards, so many platforms, nascent technologies, policy tie-ins. So CAD Trust is a public good metadata layer, which is, that describes the box, but doesn't quite explain what it is that we do and we were created for. So it's one of the first public good to come out of the climate warehouse ecosystem, and it is a collaboration between the World Bank, IETA, and the Singapore government that launched officially in 2022. And there are three ways I'd like to think about CAD Trust as a public good. So first, infrastructure, so metadata infrastructure. We've created what, for lack of better words, I call kind of the railway to enable the aggregation, linking, and harmonization of disparate data that currently exists in all these different registries, without registries giving up control, and without, which is important for programs as well as governments, of course. The second way is defining a common language. So again, we've piloted the first open source data model to describe carbon credit projects and established a governance system to iterate and build on that. already followed a series of consultations, and we continue to engage stakeholders to see how we can, through speaking the same language of data, define what this transparency looks like in the market. Which brings me to the third point, which is a convening space. So we've emerged from a multi-stakeholder process and continue to operate a collaborative governance model involving governments, crediting programs, market participants from end to end of sometimes not so digital ecosystem, as well as technology operators, to ensure that we find ways to work together and, instead of adding to the fragmentation, to hopefully aggregate and link up. So these three ways really help us, not only create, a nice database to search through, or, a public website, which is important because bringing transparency is not just about, doing it for the sake of doing it, right? We want to make sure that we build trust in carbon markets, and anybody from around the world could come and see, okay, if I want to understand what projects exist, there is a place to go. And we think that's important on its own, but it doesn't really, answer the, so what? What can we do? Which is how we see, enabling the value propositions that the service layer that you see, the other box that we touch on, as well as all these links between the different players in the ecosystem, can really help evolve over time. So some of these could be, continuing shaping to shape and drive these data harmonization efforts, and basically making sure that when we are trying to improve carbon market data, we have the right people in the room and participate to better understand each other, right? Second, what kind of transparency and integrity solutions can we enable just by aggregating this data and these very smart people in the same space? Mm-hmm. So one that we're currently exploring is understanding a set of parameters that would be required to have a double counting identification solution, right? And that's somewhere where, as Jeff will attest to, just aggregating the data goes a long way, but you also need to make sure that you have very clear answers for what you're trying to solve for, who's going to use it, and kind of where it's important to focus. So we've kicked off some efforts around that, and there are some others that we are exploring over the coming months and years. And lastly, to Sonam's point, and to everybody broadly interested in this market, and to the panels yesterday, I think we've been talking about voluntary and compliance market integration for so long, it's almost cliche now. But we really want to help operationalize Article 6. So we can go from talking about it to just saying, okay, here are some data systems, here are some common language that you can use, and perhaps some use cases that we can enable, from simple things like reporting or just understanding, the interactions between registries. What are some targeted capacity building interventions that we can do together so that we can all move forward and ultimately just channel finance, right? That's what carbon markets are for. So we just get on with it. So that's a lot, right? It's a lot to undertake. And CAD Trust is what it is because of this convening and interactive function. And we aim to serve that public good role for the market, working very closely with the stakeholders outlined here.
Thanks, Eva. And so what do you see as the single biggest challenge right now towards this digital integration and adoption of digital systems?
I think, we are seeing the same challenge that you could expect from any institution or a startup for that matter, trying to iterate upon and improve the space they operate in, with a lot of changes happening at the same time in that space, right? So I think even when you talk about integrating registries, right, and getting data in the same place, where is that data coming from? When you think about voluntary or independent crediting programs, think about what's happened in the last 2 years. People being dragged in multiple directions to address this fire over here and that fire over here, and perhaps updating a data system is not the first priority, right? Or you need to understand what you're doing it for when everybody's aligned on transparency. But obviously, changes take time, right? And same with Article 6. I think there's a lot of momentum in getting the agreement signed and working out the policy frameworks and working out how we do this technically. But that also takes time, and it takes meetings of people and initiatives to come together to then agree on a common approach. I think, don't know how to define this challenge, but I think just time and coordination is probably the answer I would give. But we take the view that to go far we need to go together. So that's what we're doing, and we've built on all our progress in kind of proving the concept over the last year and a half, and we're switching into a next phase where we're going to focus and accelerate. And I think the value proposition is becoming clearer as it emerges over time. So. Right. Ultimately positive.
Yeah, exciting times. Indeed, achieving integration of VCM and compliance markets would be a big milestone. I think we're all eager to see happen. So before I turn to the audience and give you the floor for a few questions, I wanted to get your views on the panel about the role of standards. And so that is a topic that is very dear to us at SustainCert, because as a digital validation verification body, we are ready to operate a DMRV system. We're ready to verify data digitally and offer to carbon project developer an end-to-end sort of digital solution. But the reason why we've been held back is that for digital MRV to be allowed in carbon markets, standards need to change a number of rules and requirements. What I've heard also from the panel is that what is holding us back towards adoption and integration of digital systems is this need for common data language. We all need to agree on taxonomy, standardization of how we work together. So in a number of the issues and challenges that we face collectively, it seems that there could be a role for standards. So I'd love to get your perspective on what do you expect from standards? What role do you think existing standards could play to accelerate adoption of digital solutions? And do you think we need to bring in other types of standards that may not be familiar or usual in our space, but that could add value also to building and growing this end-to-end digital system? Jeff, do you want to kick us off?
By standards, do you mean like a VCM standard?
Could be, or security standards.
Or security standards. And that's kind of the distinction, because thinking about the VCM standards, and they obviously play a critical role at every point in the life cycle.
Yeah.
And there's no real way around that. And I think that a lot of the issues that I sort of touched upon are front and center in the minds of the major standards bodies. Things like the need for strong information security requirements, robust KYC processes. The interesting thing, and kind of moving around a little bit, is that I think that they're also at the front line of some tension that's sort of underlying this whole discussion of the need for data transparency in some areas of the ecosystem and the need for data privacy in other areas of the ecosystem. And striking that balance throughout the life cycle of a project, life cycle of a credit, a transaction, et cetera. And that's, I think, kind of the critical tension here that they're sort of facing.
And that's a very good example of an issue where you'd like everyone to agree on one response to that, rather than every standard having a different take on what should be public and what should be private, right? Yeah. So how do we create that space where those issues are being dealt with as a market? We create a new level playing field, we agree on those principles, and then we can get going.
I can jump in here for some thoughts. I think, again, back to the convening function, through CAD Trust or other working groups, it's really important to just get people in the same room talking about the same things, right? We, I think, underemphasize just how quickly we can move if we are trying to define, common objective and very focused interventions. So, at CAD Trust, we don't address this particular issue, but obviously touch on things like retirement information, right? We'll never go into, secret parts of transactions or anything like that, but having a space where that need from the market can be heard and then translated to, a question that we can pose to crediting programs and say, hey, can we all sit down and agree on a common approach? I think it's the same way that we undercount the importance of soft skills. I think we really need to remember the governance of this whole thing, and I think these efforts are important.
Cool.
Then you can formalize that in many ways.
We could talk about that for much longer, but looking at the time, I want to make sure we have time for a couple of questions. So looking at the room. Yes, so we have 2 questions. So we'll take all of them together. That way we can have more, and then we'll answer them. So I think we have 3 questions. So 2 here, and then 1 at the front. If you could state your name, affiliation, and then your question, that would be great. So 1 here, 1 at the front.
Daniele Guidi, part of the Get Invest Finance Catalyst team. We are a transaction advisory program funded by multiple donors. And very interesting discussion while information is still sinking in me. I'm trying to understand from the panel how far are we from my utopia of seeing more access to this type of carbon markets through the digital ecosystem for small and medium enterprises. We end up serving many of them that are at the early growth stage, but some of them may be posing a very interesting carbon business proposition with maybe very low volumes, but high content in SDG impact and so on. And so transactional costs are very high in normal PCM and other markets. I wonder how this digital ecosystem can help this market entry.
SMEs, okay.
And especially, if the panel could reflect on corporate demand, could there be a corporate demand on this type of carbon credits? Because I can envision individuals, nicely interacting with the small projects.
Okay.
But what about corporate?
All clear. Thank you very much for your question. I think if you could pass the mic. Yeah, there's someone at the back, and then the lady at the front. Thank you.
Hi, Umid Mamadaminov from Uzbekistan, Minister of Energy. What's your recommendation for the developing nations? It's just stepping out this carbon market. What kind of platform would you recommend to start this with initially?
Okay.
And one more thing, are you using these emerging technologies like blockchain? Because the traceability, transparency you mentioned there, it's really important. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your question. I think we have one more at the front.
Hi, thank you so much. Ann Howard with the ANSI National Accreditation Board. As you know, being in the accreditation and conformity assessment space, we love standardized rules and common frameworks across the globe. So back to the initial description you were giving about there can be pieces that would be setting expectations for what we would want a verifier to check. You mentioned triangulating data, things like that. Do you think that can be standardized so we could take sort of the old model and put that at least at a sort of base level so we'd have a lot of these systems, but they could meet sort of those basic expectations? Do you think that's possible, or do you think there's going to be too many variants? Thank you.
Great. Thanks for your question, Anne, and thanks for being here. It's great to have Anab in the room. All right, I don't see any more questions, so let's maybe And please be super quick, because we'll be out of time, but I think we started a bit after time, so we should be able to catch up.
Dimitri Golubowski, BRD, European
Yeah.
Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I just want to pick up on the point that the colleague was just making on the verification side, and probably one of the kind of biggest gains that can be achieved through the digital DMRV process on the V side, on the verification. That's where the time can be shrunk as much as possible, because that's where the bulk of the time goes now. So what is the perspective of the panel in terms of having a fully digitized, automated verification process where we totally get rid of the need for manual verification at all? Is that, what's the timing you can think?
Yeah.
Is that on the horizon
Great.
or not? AI,
Yeah, happy
so
to
on.
take that. Yeah. Excellent question. Thank you for that. So, Stefan, would you like to start maybe with the question from the gentleman from GET on SMEs, and then also cover the verification question? Yeah?
I will try. I could talk for hours now, but I will try to keep it short and really address, I think, a very good question. So thanks, Dad. So first of all, I mean, the inclusion of SMEs, especially in the developing world, Sub-Saharan Africa, with, say, they are growing, they don't have the capacity to really go through the traditional process. I mean, that was one of the reasons when we developed the DMRV capacities of Prospect, not only on carbon, but also on other projects where DMRV is needed. So basically, that is basically at the heart of my interest to how to get them included and basically show that DMRV is already capable enough to basically provide sufficient transparency, sufficient proof of truth, so to say, that these projects can be included in the voluntary carbon market on any other carbon schemes that are evolving. Article 6, for instance. I think right now they're totally excluded. It's just, just give you some numbers. If you're basically an off-grid developer somewhere in, let's say, Tanzania, I think it is not below $100,000. If you go through the whole process, it takes you 3 years until you can issue credit, and then even it's not guaranteed that basically you will ever get a return on investment. Just to really put figures, it's just totally prohibitive. Coming to this question, I think that's a very, very good question. Can we standardize verification? I think it would be super important to do this, because then it can be applied across different platforms. That we have minimum standards to say what can be considered as sufficiently verified for a certain case. And there might be different levels of verification depending on what you verify. So it doesn't always have to be the same, but there could be certain minimum standards to say, okay, if I want to basically verify the carbon savings of a SME in a developing country with a high impact on other topics, it could be a different one than, let's say, for a highly industrialized and fully monitored asset somewhere in the Northern Sea or wherever, where you have basically totally different opportunities to verify data. So I think we need to standardize it, but we have to be very careful in making sure that basically we standardize the verification approaches according to the opportunities, possibilities, and needs of different market participants, because else we are as exclusive as we are right now. Yep. Maybe that hopefully gives a little bit of direction. And just quickly on the last question, to be honest, I'm a big fan of digital, obviously. I don't think we will get 100%, but I give you a little example with Uganda, like this example I brought initially. We have been able, and then, we have to prove that it really is as good as manual verification in the next couple of months, able to reduce the manual verification in this program by 80%. Because they basically agree to say, okay, whenever you're able to triangulate at least 3 data points, then we don't do a manual verification. We only go for the rest, which basically already is a massive decrease. And in the end, just to give you also some figures here, the manual verification on the ground is almost as expensive as the subsidies right now if you go by 100%. So basically decreasing it by 80% leaves much more money for the impact.
Yeah. Thanks, Stefan. Anyone wants to pick up the question from the gentleman from Uzbekistan? Sonam?
So, in full disclosure, we are not a blockchain provider. We are, I'll get in trouble for saying this, but a centralized provider. And I think kind of the thing to keep in mind for a developing nation is that there's no real need to wait for a nascent technology, because there are solutions that have been deployed for years. I mean, the company that acquired the registries business, APX, was founded in 1996. It's been building environmental registries since 2001. Every credit that we generate or that is generated on our platform is uniquely serialized and traceable and transparent. And when we hear about new technologies and waiting for a new technology, I kind of think about it. I'm not really a tech guy myself, so I put it in physical infrastructure. It feels like you can do something. You can cross a river with a bridge. You can cross a river with a tunnel. And in this discourse that's kind of developed in the last few years of, well, we need all these tunnels. Let's not forget that there are bridges that are safe, secure, and working fine every day currently. Before turning it over, the question in the back, happy to answer the demand question, if you'd like, but I think, and again, I'm going to sound like an anti-technologist here, but let's never forget that in all of these systems, there's always a human at the end of the system. And I don't think we should lose sight of that, because there's inevitably, in some cases, a degree of human error, like you put in something wrong and you want it to be checked, but you also want to reflect that there's always a degree of monitoring of the systems. And I think kind of what you're getting at is sort of figuring out where that, is it 100%, is it 90? I don't know. But there's always that human element there. And even when we think about standards and the focus on revenue towards indigenous communities, et cetera, there's always that. And I don't think we ever want to lose sight of that in these markets.
Great point. Thanks, Jen.
I'll make just to pick up on that human, there's always human. I think that's very important to remember that at the end, there's always a human aspect to it, right? And no matter what tech we're discussing. But just for Uzbeks, I think it's really up to national governments on what you want to do. For instance, if it's registries, the UNFCCC will provide. And so these options are there. So there's no really hard and fast rule, right? It's pretty flexible, but it's just that you have to be in compliance. You have to meet the participation requirements. Then on the verification, which Dimitri was mentioning, I would like to add just a twist to this in terms of, besides this whole digitization and making the verification more faster, efficient, whatever, expedited, is also we need to look at the beginning of a life cycle, right, of a project. When you have to meet the additionality. And this is where, for instance, right now, if it's just one or two projects, it's easily manageable by everyone, right? What happens when you get hundreds or a few thousands of projects? And the first test is additionality. And can we use technology, and where you remove a lot of the human interface to make a quick judgment, Otherwise, it can be very subjective, right? I'll look at one project, it doesn't meet, say, the internal rate of return, and I'll forget that what I did for that, and 100 projects down the line, I'll have a different assessment. So some of these things, we have to look also into the additionality part of it, yeah. And then on the standardizations of this, on the SME, again, I agree, and actually, thank you for that view, because it's something which, especially, I'm fully aware of these things also, that, the high transaction costs and all. And so in my country, we are trying to create through this, Bhutan Climate Fund, and not just as a fund, but can we aggregate all these credits? Can we aggregate projects and all to see how we can reduce the transaction costs here? So these are some, again, just sharing a national experience on this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sonam. I realize we're way over time. Yeva, would you like to share final words?
Yes. So I think mostly to address the question from the gentleman from Uzbekistan, but also to just echo the sentiments, right? We're talking about technology, but not for technology's sake. It has to work for the people that operate it and for the ultimate goal of what we're trying to achieve, right? So I think any government or program, when choosing what technology to use, should first solve for those things and identify what those needs are. So, again, quick points. The CAD Trust was built using a blockchain system, but it's not blockchain to be cool and hip with the times, although could argue which way that's gone, but to serve very specific purposes, is to enable an auditable, decentralized record and connecting different systems without giving up control, right? Without asking programs or countries to give up control, and to have a record that's shared among all the participants of what's going on. That's a very specific need that we were looking to fill, and blockchain just happens to enable us to do that and create this metadata layer, but that's all we use it for. And there's no need to go, deeper than that. And same way when you're looking at, government needs for, say, Article 6 reporting, you may not even need a registry at the start. We just need an aggregated source of where to get the data. So then you shop around and you think, okay, I can make do with an Excel spreadsheet and like a download, of aggregated data, and then when I'm ready to go to the next level, or maybe get a registry, I'll integrate with other systems that can then go further for me. But first, I think it's important to identify what we're solving for, and we're not doing this to be. Well, we are doing this to move the carbon market and mature it and scale it with integrity, right? But the tech needs to serve that purpose, not the other way around.
Great. Thanks, Eva. And what keeps me hopeful, personally, although we haven't seen the level of adoption we were maybe anticipating, is that we have now in the ecosystem a number of really well-established, mature technology providers talking to each other, working together to come up with standardized ways of how we do verification, how we do common data languages, how we work together to really scale our collective ecosystem. And that's a big shift. We weren't there a few years ago, we're there now. So this is really the stepping stone on which we can build a growing and thriving market-based ecosystem. So that is keeping me hopeful. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for you in the room.